All right. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. This is Sarah at carnivore.yogi on Instagram. Thank you for coming on my YouTube channel. Today I have Mary with me, and I found Mary, I think probably like 6 months into my carnivore journey. I started following her. So much of the stuff that she was saying on her page and podcasts and things I had watched with her just like really spoke to my heart, because she's somebody who talks about food sobriety and talks about food addiction and actually says things that a lot of people say, oh, that's not valid, that's not true. And we'll get into her story, she's lost a lot of weight and kept it off. And I think maintenance is a whole other ball game. You know, the losing weight is one thing, and then the maintenance is another thing. So thank you so much, Mary, for coming on and joining
me. For asking me.
Yeah. So just tell everyone, and we'll get at the end, I'm going to like do major shout out, like your coaching and Instagram profile and all that stuff. But for people who have never followed you before, talk about your journey a little bit and your weight loss journey and, you know, maintenance and all that stuff. Start from the beginning.
All right. Well, I mean, I always say, like, I've had a lifelong dysfunctional love affair with food that started when I was a kid. You know, and in high school, I, you know, went on my first diet. I was also hospitalized for bulimia in high school. And then after school, like the issues with weight and food just continued through my pregnancies, you know, gaining so much weight, like way more weight than you're supposed to when you're pregnant. My third pregnancy, I had gestational diabetes, and in 2008, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and I had high blood pressure. All my life, I've had asthma, had an inhaler from the time I was 7 years old. Have always had like the asthma and allergy thing going on. I had psoriasis, sleep apnea, I snored, like I had all kinds of wow. issues. And I found myself at age 42 feeling like I was in my 60s. And just, I was like over it. You know, I've been from, you know, like age 14, I guess, or even younger, like when I discovered food as comfort, I was a preteen, but like my first diet at age 14. So from 14 to 42, I had done all the things. You know, tried everything: Phentermine, Weight Watchers, Slim Fast, Richard Simmons Deal-A-Meal, like all the stuff, right? All the infomercial things and Dexatrim and all the stuff, over and over and over. And like my biggest thing was calorie counting. I was all about like calorie counting. And so, you know, I did all that and I struggled over the years. And looking back, I mean, I got a little bit of, you know, I was a little bit chubby when I first went on, you know, when I went on my first diet. But I ended up dieting myself to 260 pounds.
Yeah.
Because the dieting set in motion that feeling of restriction. And of course, I was doing like very low calorie, low fat, which was not satisfying. So I was setting myself up for binges. And, you know, and then you throw in all the emotional factors combined with the dieting, the chronic dieting, you know, it was definitely a recipe for obesity and health issues. So found myself at age 42, just over it all. And I had dabbled in low carb with Atkins a couple of times. So this time around, I'm like, okay, I'm going to do Atkins again, because I knew that carbs were an issue for me. And then I was about 3 or 4 days into it. I was talking to a friend, Brian Williamson, who started Keto Evangelist. And he said, don't do Atkins, like do keto. And I was like, what's that? I've never heard of it before.
Yeah.
So that was like almost 6 years ago. I'm like, who? Wow. No, I didn't know the keto word. Nobody knew what it was. And so I'm like, okay, and he tells me about it. And I'm like, he's telling me, oh, high fat. And I honestly, like when he first started telling me to eat high fat. So here's the thing about Brian, for people that don't know, he has a very dry sense of humor. He's a funny guy. And so literally, like for the first like few seconds, like, you know, maybe a minute or so, I'm like, he's kidding. Like, he's not really like, I'm like, come on. But he was serious. And I was like, what? I'm trying to lose weight, Brian. Like, why would I eat a bunch of fat? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. but he told me, like, no, go look this up. And he told me about Jimmy Moore's book, Keto Clarity. And so I went home and I like looked stuff up and I was like, okay, well, I'll give it a try. And had I not experienced what I experienced, like if I'd have found it online, I'd have been like, whatever. Or if some stranger had told me about it, I would have been like, no, I wouldn't have like given it a second thought. So anyway, it was total game changer for me. I'm like, not only did I feel satisfied, like the weight started just melting off. I was not struggling, with hunger or suffering from hunger. So like I had that honeymoon period where like everything feels great. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm fixed. I found the answer.
Yes.
But then when after things settle down and your hormones come more into, like everything kind of becomes more normal, the weight loss slows down a little bit, then the honeymoon period is like over, right? And that emotional component like kicks back in. So then I started keto-fying everything, right? I'm like blueberry muffins, keto brownies, like all the stuff. Yeah. And then one day I realized I was trading. It was like, okay, is it good that I'm, eating keto brownies versus Betty Crocker in a box brownies? Yes, that's a phenomenally better choice. However, if you're still eating the whole thing of brownies, or like I found on YouTube, like cooking keto with Christy or whatever, she had these like 2 carb blueberry muffins. And so here's what I did. I make the blueberry muffins. It's the recipe makes 6 and they're 2 carbs each. So what does the addicted brain do?
Wow.
I can have all 6 muffins for 12 carbs. But it's not normal to eat 12 or 6 muffins like in one day or in one sitting. That's not normal. So it finally occurred to me.
Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah, of course. I mean, right away, my brain's like lighting up. I get it. You're speaking my language.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, and so then when so I'm going through this like, process of recovery. I get off the sugar and grains, but I replace it with, sweetener and nut flours, and I'm doing all the things. And then I finally realized, hey, this is still not normal. I'm still a slave to food. I'm still like, okay, I've lost weight and I feel better, but I'm still all thinking about food all the time, even though I'm not hungry. Like this diet has satisfied me. I feel good, but I'm still obsessed with food because, I think I can't live without sweets or, all those great, we do all the mental gymnastics and we're just looking to, replace one addiction with another. And I finally realized that's not what I want. And so that's when recovery really kicked in. It was like letting go of that stuff. And it almost was harder to let go of all the keto stuff.
Yeah.
Because though, like it's clear that sugar and grains, that's not allowed, right? That's a firm boundary for me.
Yeah.
But well, stevia and erythritol and almond flour and coconut, that's allowed, right? So it's harder to quit something that's allowed because again, the addicted brain is like, well, that's allowed. Why can't you have it? And
like that aspect of permission is like what the addicted brain is like, oh, I have permission,
Yeah. So, and then Brian one day said to me, he's like, look, just because something is allowed doesn't mean it's beneficial. And that was like a light bulb moment for me. Like, oh, you're right. Like, so if it's not serving me well, why would I continue? And so when I cut out, like there was a period of I'm not saying like I never have keto sweets and stuff. I do occasionally, like I can count on one hand how many times I have it in a year, but I went for like 2 years with nothing. Like I was a purist. All of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I don't do sweets. But that's what I needed at the time. I needed to realize that I could live happily and productively and without feeling like, not having the FOMO or feeling deprived. Like I didn't have to have that stuff in order to live life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's huge. And I think so many people go from, standard American diet to possibly keto, and they maybe need some of those treats as like a bridge to get past that physical addiction that they have to sugar. But then I think they use turn a bridge into a crutch, and then they wonder why they're not having results, or they're still having that food obsession, food addiction, and all those emotions around food that they really want to be free from, and that's what I love when you talk about like food sobriety. And that's just so many people are like, oh, sobriety is reserved for drugs and alcohol, and they don't realize that food is the biggest and most abused drug that there is, and
I think it's even hard. So I think it's harder, and I know this upsets every time I say this. I always, when I say it online, I get blowback, from people that are in recovery from drugs and alcohol. But I think that food is harder because we need to eat. It's not like drugs and alcohol where you can just like stop it. You don't need drugs and alcohol to survive life, right? Like people feel like they do, right? But you don't, we can live without alcohol, we could live without drugs, but we have to eat. So, that makes it harder to navigate. And because then you got to figure out, okay, well, what are my problems? Because it's not just like sugar. Like I can overeat keto foods. I could and not even the sweet stuff. Like that's why I hate when people say, well, it's impossible to overeat meat. Really? Watch me. I could eat 2 pounds of prime rib in one sitting if I wanted to. Yeah. So it's an emotional thing. It's not a satiety thing. Like meat obviously is more satiating for me, but if I was having an emotional moment, there's no reason why I couldn't like binge on meat.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I think that's hard for people to understand, and we don't have to have alcohol or drugs to survive, but we do have to have food to survive. And kind of learning how to, once those addiction centers are active in your brain, you can't really access your frontal lobe. You start, it takes over your whole life. And that's another thing I love that you talk about, when you were at the end before you found keto, kind of the state that you were in with your life and not really living, and it's like this slow death. Can you talk about that a little bit more for people?
Yeah. I was just like surviving every day. I was not thriving. I was on medications. I didn't feel good, but it's interesting. Like I knew I didn't feel good, but you convince but you do your life every day. It wasn't like I was bedridden or anything or not meeting my responsibilities because I didn't feel good. It was just like, this is just what it is, right? You adapt. And so I knew I didn't feel great, but I didn't know how terrible I felt until I felt better. But like missing out on things and not doing certain things because of weight. Because I had no energy or something, one of the things that initially was, on my list of goals, obviously besides losing weight and getting off medications, was I wanted to play in the backyard with my youngest. I would go out, he'd be like, Mommy, let's, kick the ball around. Let's do this. Let's do that. Well, 260 pounds and feeling like crap, like 5 minutes was my max, and he was just getting going. And so I would feel terrible. I'd be like, oh, I'm tired already, and I just couldn't do it. Like I was like, I'm going to have a heart attack in the backyard with my kid.
Yeah.
It was terrible. So like, that was one of the things that me, and, it's now, like before, everything, my life revolved around food. When I was going to eat, what I was going to eat, what am I going to make next? And I'm sitting down for breakfast. Well, okay, what am I going to eat for lunch? Like you're just obsessed and constantly thinking about food. That was like all I thought about. And that was like it overshadowed everything else. I'm going out for the day. It's like, oh, where am I going to eat today? And I would stop at more than one drive-through, just everything revolved around food. And I was just, I needed relief from that. And it still like took, over a year into keto before I could start to break away from being obsessed with food.
Yeah. And the one thing I love about watching you on Instagram, that you put your outfit for the day and you get your nails done and your hair done. And that for me, when I was extremely overweight, I stopped doing that. I stopped buying outfits. I stopped caring how I looked so much. And I I was like, well, what's the point? You know,
Yeah.
I just didn't feel well, but yeah, you're just so super depressed. Like you just really can't help yourself. And so, you know, for me, like I love seeing you put that out there every day of like, this is my outfit for the day. And like, it's just, it's really nice that it's not like, oh, this is just what I ate today. This is the food I had today. Like the whole person begins to develop, you know, because when you're under that thumb of food addiction, you literally are not, I don't feel like you can be a whole person, that you can't really contribute to the world. You can't really live your full life. And like I said, it's like this slow, kind of a painful death that I see so many people just existing, you know, doing bare minimum. Yeah.
Yeah, I stopped. I stopped coloring my hair for a while. Like I would just like pull it up in a, you know, a tie, and I stopped getting my nails done. Because even for a while I was overweight, I still did those things, but it's progressive, you know. So it would just like I would become like more, you know, more and more depressed and more and more isolated and just stay, you know. And I'm a homeschool mom, so it was very easy for me to isolate myself in the house. And you know, before I knew it was like, okay, I'm just getting, I didn't put makeup on anymore, stopped getting my nails done. I just wore, you know, baggy shirts that I thought would cover stuff up. Like my before picture, the one that I use most often, in that white t-shirt, like I thought, like in my mind, like I thought, oh, this big baggy shirt was like hiding everything. And so that day when I took that picture, I used an actual camera because I had like a crappy camera phone. I used an actual camera. And when I looked at the screen, you know, and I saw it, like it was shocking to me. Like I knew I was fat. Like I could look in the mirror and I'm like, okay, I'm fat. But my mind, like I call it, it's not really a joke. It's not funny, but I called it like reverse anorexia. Like I look and like, oh, you look fine, you know? And I did it. And then when I saw it on the little, you know, screen on the camera, it was devastating. And so combined that, like, and with stepping on the scale that morning and weighing 260 pounds, I remember thinking, holy crap, I'm only 40 pounds away from 300 pounds. How did this happen? And I just had like a breakdown, like crying really so hard I had snot bubbles. That's like how that was. It was like I just broke down crying over this picture. Yeah. And it was just
it's awful.
Terrible. Yeah.
It's, you know, you've come so far, and I think that you're just such a great example for so many women, and you're so strong. And so thank you for just putting all your stuff out there, your story out there, because I know it's helping. I know that what you're saying, a lot of people are going to be able to completely relate to that, and that those feelings, you know, of just like, oh my gosh, like how did this happen? How did I get here?
And that's why I share like the outfit thing. Sometimes people are like, nobody cares about your outfit. And I'm like, okay, then don't follow me. Because one of the reasons I started sharing was because all of the negative experiences that I had had in the dressing room prior to losing weight, it was always terrible, you know. And you're in the dressing room, I would be angry, I'd be frustrated, and of course, you know, you're in the dress and you're like, I can't believe, you know, and I'm pissed about being a size 20 and all this stuff. But then what did I do when I left there? I went and I binged. Like that's not helping. That's not, you know, it was this vicious, you know, cycle. So then when I started having like experiences in the dressing room of, oh my God, I can't believe this fits. Oh my, you know, and seeing the numbers on and I know, like, I really try to like focus less and less like on the numbers on the tags, but it's still, I'm not there yet. I still get I'm excited about wearing a smaller size, but you know, I would have these experiences. And so then I thought I'm going to talk about this because I know I'm not the only one who's had, you know, hundreds of devastating experiences in the dressing room. And this is something that other people can look forward to. You know what? Someday you'll be in the dressing room and you're not going to have a meltdown.
Yeah, exactly. Just trying to buy clothes. I mean, it's such a basic thing that so many people just take for granted, you know, and I think a lot of people will tend to just buy things online so that they don't even have to deal with it, you know, but I think that's such a healthy, wonderful thing that you can go out there and just find enjoyment in life. And it doesn't revolve around food, and it's not perpetuating that food obsession.
Right.
So it's so important.
It's
Yeah, go
hard
ahead.
to get away from that because
Yeah.
society, I mean, look at the holidays right now. Like
Oh, yeah.
even without the holidays,
Yeah.
society has made food social. Like everything revolves around food. You go to the movies, you eat. Go out to eat with your friends. Even at bars, there's bar food. Like there's food everywhere, and
Yeah.
everything revolves around it. And when families get together, like sometimes it's like that's all it is. And only thing that everybody talks about before getting together, besides what time, is what
Yeah.
is everybody bringing.
Right.
It's all about the food. So it can be hard to break out of that.
Yeah. How do you personally navigate that in your own life? Like, how do you find ways around that? Because I know you still have to go to social events. You've got children, and you're navigating all that. So, what are your strategies for that?
So in the beginning, I would like so as a homeschool mom, we've had lots of like events, and
Yeah.
like it's all potluck stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so in the beginning, I would either eat beforehand, so that I felt safe, I felt satisfied before I got there in case there was stuff there that I couldn't eat, and because there have been times where like I went somewhere and literally
Yeah.
nothing I could eat. So I learned that, like, okay, like eat beforehand. So if there isn't anything I can have, I'll be okay. Um, and then that evolved to like, well, even if I don't eat anything beforehand, I still know I'll be okay. Like, in recovery, your mindset evolves, as
Yeah.
your relationship improves with food. So I would do stuff like that in the beginning. Now, like, honestly, like at this point, almost 6 years in, I don't have, I'm not saying this like in a grandiose kind of way. I don't have food issues anymore because I do have
Yeah.
food issues, but like I can be somewhere and people are eating stuff and I might be hungry, but there's nothing I can have. Like, I'm fine. I'll live till I get home. Like, it doesn't feel like in the beginning where it was like I cried. Like I
Yeah.
was so mad and I would cry about like not being able to have dessert,
Yeah.
or, it's not fair that my best friend in the world, she's had 12 babies and she still wears a size 2, you
Yeah.
know. And we
Yeah.
would be on a road trip and she's eating a whole box of Twinkies
Yeah.
and never gaining it out, like those kind of things. Like I would
Yeah.
be frustrated and compare and
Yeah.
but it's not like that for me anymore. But I know in the beginning it's harder. And so what I
Yeah.
tell people is plan ahead,
Yes.
something beforehand, bring things that you can eat, and bring enough that if the only thing you can eat there is what you brought, and mentally prepare to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, we get so emotional about food,
Yes.
and we do the whole, like, we covet what other people have on their plate, and we start to play that, we have the pity party, and like, oh, we're so focused on what we can't have
Right.
that we are not in the moment, and we do it to ourselves, like
Yeah.
the fear of missing out and that deprivation mentality. And really it is all the way that you look at it. We only feel deprived for telling ourselves we're deprived.
Yeah. Yeah.
We set ourselves up for that.
Yeah.
um,
I like that you say it's gotten easier for you over time, because I think that's a big takeaway message for people. Like, and I'm trying to right now do some study on food addiction and neurochemistry and the way that the brain actually operates. And I think what people don't understand is the brain is very neuroplastic. Like, we have the power to rewire our
yeah.
brain. And there are other things, there's some hacks you can do, like meditation and that type of stuff. But honestly, there's not a shortcut. You're going to have to go through certain times where you're just going to have to override that part of your brain, because those neural pathways to have a social event and eat that stuff, or have a birthday party and eat that stuff, they're so strong. They're so hardwired
Yeah.
that it is a matter, and you said, I cried and I would have a hard time going to these things. And now it's kind of like, okay, no big deal. But you've done the hard work of not giving in and of showing up to those events and preparing, and over and over and over again. So those neural pathways for you are very strong. You know, they're very solid. But I think for anyone who's watching, who's at that point where they're like going to the events and they're crying and they're having a hard time, because I still deal with that. You know, I haven't been away from all that behavior as long as you have. So it is still hard for me sometimes. But there's hope. And that's the biggest message I think that's important.
There were certain things that I did, like mind game, you know, because there are what I, you know, when we have our, you know, Coach Jessica and I do our food addiction and recovery group, there are things that we call, you know, there's short-term strategies, things that we can do to distract ourselves in the moment, right?
Yeah.
And those are fine for like in the moment, but ultimately we have to deal with the big picture, because we can't just use short-term strategies the rest of our life to stay away from food. You know, a lot of people, you know, people will say, you know, you see this online on the Facebook groups, oh, just get everything out of your house. Well, if you live by yourself, that's fine. Okay, get everything out of your house. But let's acknowledge that we're grown-ups and I have a car and I can go to the store and load up if I want to. So getting stuff out of the house, okay, that might help. But what if you live with other people? Like I lived with other people. And so one of the things that I did, like a mind game, was because you know, people ask me all the time, well, how do you know, does anybody else in your house, like, are there carbs in your house? Like if there's carbs in your house, it's going to be impossible for you to, you know, change, right? People think that, like, I can't do it when there's people around me eating stuff. Well, yes, you can. But so like I had played this game of like, okay, if I was at work and there was a community fridge and people had their stuff in there and it had, you know, here's a little container, it says Sarah on it. That's Sarah's food. Mary's not going to eat Sarah's, ideally, right? Mary's not going to eat Sarah's food. So when I would open the pantry and see like the 6 boxes of cereal and the cookies and all the stuff, I'd be like, okay, that belongs to Brett and Nolan and Bradley. That is not my food. Yeah. And I would just do that, you know, over and over. If that's not my food, I don't eat that anymore. That, you know, that kind of thing. And it would just, you know, get easier. I also would like shut down my kitchen. Like if I was having a craving for something at a restaurant and I got in my car and I drove to the restaurant and I get there and the doors are locked and the lights are out, obviously I'm not getting what I'm after, right? Like that's going to rob the place, right? I'm not going to get that thing I was after. So what do I do? Okay, well, turn around and go home. So I would shut down the kitchen. In my mind, it's like, okay, the kitchen is closed. The lights are out. The doors are locked. So even if I want something, I can't get in. And I would just, you know, that was just like one of the things I would do. And it works at, you know, certain times. It's in the moment. But ultimately, I had to figure out, okay, why am I in this situation where I'm wanting to eat when I'm not hungry? What do I think that this food is going to do for me? Right. And it's almost always, you know, what I think the food is going to do, it's not really going to do that. Like we use food for soothing, for entertainment, for comfort, for reward, but ultimately it's not those things. It's just that, you know, the taste of food is very fleeting, you know, like we put it in our mouth, it tastes good for a second, but before we even swallow it, most times our brain is already going, you loser, why, you know, you're not supposed to be eating this. And it starts right then. Right.
So there's like no enjoyment in it at all. Just, yeah. And that's, you know, the thing with addiction is like you're doing something that you don't want to be doing, but you continue to do it and you don't know how to break that vicious cycle. Yeah. So what would you say to someone who maybe is, especially now we're kind of in the holidays, I don't know when people are watching this, but who's maybe stuck in that vicious cycle? They're like, I'm eating and I don't want to be eating this stuff. It's making me feel horrible. I'm eating too much. I'm making myself sick every day. I'm not really living. Like, what would you say to that person?
So a couple different things here. Like one, if we keep, you know, we've heard this before, right? If we keep doing the same thing over and over, we're going to keep getting the same results. Right. You know, that it's insanity to think that you could do this thing over and over again and somehow it's going to work out differently. You know, so like the holidays right now. I had a client who she had been doing great. She was food sober for 5 weeks. She had a plan even for Thanksgiving. We had we mapped out a plan of what she was going to do. And then her son showed up with a pumpkin pie. And this is where, how the addictive brain works, right? She's like, oh, I've been so good for 5 weeks. Yeah. And that pie looks really good. I'm just going to have a little sliver. And she literally did cut off like a little sliver. Yeah. But once she ate it, so first the voice of sabotage is like, oh, you can have one piece. You've been so good for 5 weeks. It'll be fine. And then you cut the one piece, and then the voice of sabotage uses that against you. You loser. You had a piece, and so now you may as well just eat the rest. Keep eating. And so it compounds, right? And so she ends up eating like half the pumpkin pie. And then, of course, the guilt and all that, comes in. But, I mean, that's how it works. We hear that voice and we agree with it. And so the way that we break out of that is that when we hear the voice, we stop. We go, okay, when have I ever just had one piece?
Right.
This is a lie. It's a lie that I can have one piece right now. Right. I can't. I've never done that. Yeah. 1 is too many, 10 is not enough.
Yeah.
So no, Ed, as we call it, Ed. But
I love it.
Give it a name. And it's so funny because I'll talk about Ed, and even the other day somebody asked me, like, is Ed an abusive person that's in your life? And I had a lady thought that Ed was my husband one time. I'm like, no. No, Ed is that voice of sabotage. It's a jerk, It's this little part, it's that disordered part of our brain that when we give it power, it just takes over our brain. So, the voice of sabotage is telling lies. So what is the, antidote to a lie? The truth. So when the voice is like, have one piece, the truth is, hey, Ed, I've never had just one piece.
Yeah.
So it's not true that I could just have a sliver and move on with my life. I'm not going to have any because that's the only thing that's going to work.
Yeah.
We have to just fight back. And then the more that we do that, the easier it becomes. Like I said, it feels really hard in the beginning. Anything that we're learning, like when you get a new job, anything that you do new that you've never done before feels hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
And frustrating. Yeah. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And then after a while, that voice kind of like Ed doesn't really come at me with food anymore. Like I'm not in a situation where he's like, oh, hey, you should eat that. Because it's not even like in the same route, I'm not even there with that. But like last week at the gym, he came at me over body image, and like I for 20 minutes I like went back and forth with the disordered thoughts about how fat I look when I'm doing deadlifts and how these leggings, I shouldn't be wearing these color leggings because this color leggings is for women who are smaller than you are, Mary. Like, don't, these make you look fat, and like all this mental torture over body image. So that's where like I'm still growing, and I struggle with that more so than the food.
Yeah.
So you have that to look forward to.
Just like realizing that that's not you talking, and it's not you. It's not an original. It doesn't come from you.
Right.
That Ed is not who you are. That is a completely separate entity, and learning how to recognize that, I think that's really valuable for people, because we start to personalize it, and then people say, oh, I'm always going to feel this way, and it's always going to be like this. And, it's the same thing of those neural pathways. You take the power away from it by making it a separate thing.
Everybody thinks that's their voice though, right? Like, cause we hear it in our own voice.
Yeah.
But the thing is if we wake up in the morning and we're like, my intention today, today I'm going to be on plan. I'm not going to stray from keto or carnivore today. Like today's the day. But by noon, we are already like, we're off. We're away from what we intended. We know that's not us. Our intention was to stay on plan.
Right.
But the voice of sabotage is to get us to it, it's telling us something that's going to lead us back to our addiction. So if we have these thoughts and we haven't discerned yet that it's not our own voice, we can say, like, is this leading me back to my addiction, or is this making me stay with my intention that I woke up this morning? How do I know it's me or not? If it's leading you back to your addiction, it's not you.
That's so great. That's huge. I think everyone needs to understand that, like, that's how you differentiate. If it's something that's leading you towards that addiction or those things you don't want to do, then that's not you, because that's not how nature works. That's not what, if you believe in God, higher power, that's not the way that we were created, is to self-destruct. We were created to survive, to live. And I guess, kind of speaking of, like, other voices, or maybe like primitive brain, the whole idea of deprivation. I know you mentioned that, you think you failed a lot on diets and low fat and restriction. Just if you can speak a little bit about the role that deprivation maybe plays in the whole, like, binging sugar cycle, that just how that all plays out.
So the deprivation, there's physical, like, so if you're eating extremely low calorie and low fat, you, of course, like, your body is letting you know it's not getting what it needs. So that there's that physical deprivation. But then also we get the FOMO thing, like when we're in social situations and we're trying, everyone around us is eating all the stuff we wish we could eat, then the mental torture, kicks in, and we feel sorry for ourselves, and, oh, I wish I could have that. But that comes from, so over the years, I've done seen therapists, I've done like the 12-step eating programs and other, and then I was hospitalized, and, all these things where they watch you eat, like, there's all these things. And the one thing that is so frustrating about the eating disorder community, the mainstream recovery programs, is they try to force people into being moderators when that's not what we are. Like, and that if you can't be a moderator, then you're failing at your recovery. And so, and it comes from that, like, that we shouldn't deprive ourselves, or that we, it's because we feel uncomfortable or deprived that we're binging. And then you hear that word restrict, like we hear all the time, oh, don't do anything too restrictive, or if you restrict too much, then you're going to set yourself up for a binge. But in drug and alcohol recovery programs, no one is telling the alcoholic that it's bad to restrict alcohol, that they need to learn to moderate alcohol. Like, look, just only drink on, if you just only go to the bar on Friday night, just so, or at the family party, just have 2 drinks. Like, no one trying to make alcoholics and drug addicts be moderators. But in the food addiction recovery eating disorders, they're trying to force people to moderate their drug of choice. And that is why the failure rate is so high, and why women can't get healthy. And then out of that is the whole body positivity movement, which, don't get me wrong, I always have to, like, clarify, like, we should love ourselves where we're at. Yes. But if we are riddled with disease,
and unhealthy,
we need to do something about it. It's not being negative about your body if you are unhealthy. Like, so it's all kind of like tied together, and it's kind of it like most of the recovery programs out there keep people sick because everyone's afraid of the A word. Abstain. But that's how it works. You abstain. You got to get rid of it so that you aren't upset, thinking, you're not, like, after it all the time.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, like, people just think that there's, you're at one point you're going to be able to have that one cupcake and it's going to be okay, and it's not going to set off those centers in your brain. And that's just not been my experience at all, and and with the whole body positivity movement, I agree with you 100%. I think that you should love the skin that you're in, and dress yourself and enjoy, be happy. But we have in our society normalized things that are not normal, being hangry. We've normalized that. We've normalized the blood sugar spiking. We've normalized bloating and indigestion and PCOS and all of these health issues that it's not actually normal to have, and they're a result of extra fat on the body,
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that word normal, because we hear that all the time, and professionals and stuff, like when hundreds of thousands of women with PCOS, right? Millions of people that are obese. And it's become, this thing of like, oh, that's normal, right? They use the word
Right.
normal. It's common.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it normal. Just because something's common doesn't make it normal. So all of these things are common, but it's not normal to be in a state of unhealthiness.
Yeah, exactly. And we pathologize, so many things, not even necessarily weight related, but the skin. You said you had the psoriasis and the sleep apnea and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, a lot of people deal with that, but should they be dealing with that?
Right.
Should that be something that's they have to really be worrying about?
Right. And still people are looking to like the pharmaceutical industry and their doctors to fix those things rather than it's so much. So for a lot of people, it feels like, oh, well, changing your diet's too hard. Give me the magic pill.
Yeah.
But in most cases, the pills don't work and they cause more problems.
You got to have other pills to deal with those pills. And then you're on 5 or 6 different medications. And yeah, I've been there and done that. I've been on multiple medications at once before. And then here's a sleeping pill. And then you can't, it's just like this absolutely horrible vicious cycle. And you feel like you've got a pharmacy in your house too. So it's not just about being thin and skinny and looking a certain way. Like, it's about your health, and it's about how you actually feel, how your body feels. And so I think that's really important, and a takeaway, because I think so much we get caught up in like having the perfect body and looking a certain way and having, no body fat and all that. And that's not realistic for some people. You're going to have some body fat. It's normal. So, and I struggle with that myself, because I'm the healthiest I've ever been, but I'm not the thinnest I've ever been. I've been a lot thinner than this before, but I didn't have a period. And, my sleep was crappy, and I was anxious and nervous and freezing cold all of the time, but I looked great.
Yeah.
So
it is hard to get away from that. And when you're online, on social media, all that, there are like what I refer to as the beautiful people. There's the beautiful people, and we all are like wanting to look like the beautiful people. And this is one of the areas that I get frustrated in, especially in light of the addiction issues that a lot of people have. There are a lot of people on social media that look fantastic. They have crap tons of followers.
Yep.
But they are neck deep in disordered behavior. Yes. And they talk about like, there's somebody that I follow, a keto person, that like at the beginning of November, like before Halloween, already started talking about Thanksgiving and everything that they were going to eat. They planning to binge an entire month ahead of time, and there's people that they do this, and it's like, they look great. And then, you get somebody, out there who, oh, I would love to look like that. And a lot of people don't think past how, they just are looking at like how the person looks. Yeah. And so they're like, oh, okay, this person ate this, and that, and their blood sugar didn't spike. Right. But that person has 9% body fat and you have 45% body fat. Exactly. And you are insulin resistant and they're more insulin sensitive. And so people need to be more discerning, like when they're following people, because, they'll follow somebody and they'll try to do things the way that person does it, but they are not that person.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And there's nuances. The other thing to kind of, not really to jump, but to talk about, because I know I have a lot of women that kind of follow me around my age, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger, is how to kind of approach like being over 40 and kind of being in the carnivore keto space, and maybe some stuff that you've come up against and how you've dealt with that. That's a topic that's kind of near and dear to me right now, because I'm dealing with that myself.
I'm 48. I am not at my lowest keto weight right now, because I've been like going through this like hormonal stuff like the last year and a half, and the things that I did prior that worked for me you know, in the first few years stopped working for me last year. Like one of the things that I had to change to get my scale to start going down again was flipping my eating window. So I think that those of us that are older and going through the perimenopause, that the skipping breakfast and lunch and eating later in the day and in the evening is not the way to go for us. I started I did fasting for years, doing it that way, where I didn't eat I didn't eat till later in the day. That stopped working. I started gaining doing that. When I flipped the window, I didn't change the food I was eating or how much I was eating. I simply flipped the window, and then my night sweats stopped and I stopped gaining. So that's definitely one, you know, thing to look at. And I think we need to be, when we're in our 40s and realizing that like the change is coming, we have to be open to doing something different. We can't just say, well, this is, because it's again that even like with the food addiction, trying to overcome the food addiction, we like, okay, well, this worked for me in year one, and we keep doing it, and we're not getting the same results. And like, why are we continuing doing it? We got to be willing to try something different. Maybe it's going from keto to carnivore. I mean, I know the first time I tried carnivore, like I was eating like 3,000 calories a day, and I lost 7 pounds.
That's kind of where I'm at right now.
That at 165 pounds, that 3,000 calories a day was a deficit for me. It was not.
That's the experience I've had lately with carnivore. I took out eggs and I took out cheese, and finally the scale started moving. But I tracked my calories just out of curiosity, because I'm trying to be more intuitive and less stressed out, but the scale, or my inches, because I don't weigh myself yet. I might eventually start doing that, but right now it messes with my head too much. But I started measuring my waist and my hips, and I've been losing inches and eating sometimes 3,000 calories a day. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. But I think it was just the eggs and the cheese, just needed, maybe I was having inflammatory reactions towards those, and your body just metabolizes those things differently. So,
Well, I think it showed too, because when my standard keto was typically no more than the 20 grams of carbs a day. And I would get it from avocado or, the occasional salad or like bacon wrapped green meat, things like that. So it wasn't like I was eating the wrong kinds of carbs or even a lot of carbs, but just cutting out just the 20 grams of carbs made a huge difference in my appetite. And clearly what little carbs I was eating was still causing some inflammation. Like I didn't lose 7 pounds of body fat that first week going carnivore. There was clearly still like water and inflammation there.
I think that's what it was for me, going off the eggs and cheese. It was like a big whoosh, and I was like, oh, I guess those foods were irritating to me, So I think figuring that out. And then, I think that people in the keto, I think they're so used to have like restricting protein. And I don't know how you are with, maybe allowing yourself to eat more protein. For me, that's kind of made a big difference.
Yeah, that's something else I've changed like the last few months, is eating higher protein than I previously ate. It used to be a problem for me. Like I would notice, because I'm a numbers person, and because I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2008, testing my blood sugar is something I've done since then. So I still do it, even though I maintain an A1C of 4.9. I still check my blood sugar like 3 or 4 times a day. It's because I just do it. I would like to break away from that eventually, but it used to be like protein, like I would know from the numbers, like, if I went over a certain amount of protein, that it did affect my numbers. And people will be out there saying, no, it doesn't, protein doesn't cause, it does in metabolically damaged people. But I think the more year after year, my insulin sensitivity improved, my protein threshold increased. And I don't I'll go ahead and say it. Like right now, I'm eating like 205 grams of protein a day. That's what my coach has me on. And my fat is like around 100 grams a day right now.
Yeah.
And I feel fine, I feel good. I feel good. The scale is going down. But there's no way that 2 years ago I could have done that without, consequences.
Right. I think you've undergone so much healing also, and that's a hard thing for other people to understand. And what I've kind of gone through with carnivore is like I've undergone a ton of healing, and when your body is going through that healing, it's not going to prioritize the weight loss. It's gonna prioritize getting rid of those cysts or fixing your blood sugar, those internal issues.
Yeah. Well, so like the weight loss is secondary. When we get healthy, then the weight loss can happen.
Yeah. So important for people to know, because they just want that scale to move. They just want those numbers. And you can lose weight on a calorie restriction. You can go on a fast. You can do that. I can name 15 diets. Exactly. I did the freaking cabbage soup diet when I was 17 years old to get ready for prom. And it was horrible, and of course I lost the weight, but of course I gained it right back. And that was all kind of deprivation diets for me, where I'm restricting. It just, it never works out in the end. It just doesn't work out for me. So,
So restricting in that kind of way, like, it is not sustainable. No. But I hate when people apply the word, that word to like keto and carnivore, because it's a different animal. Like, and there's lots of harmful things that, like, there's nothing wrong with restricting ourselves from something that's harmful to us.
Right.
If I say carbohydrates, even in a small amount, make me more hungry or raise my blood sugar or cause me to obsess, then that's harmful. So why would it be a bad thing for me to restrict myself from that? Like, why is that bad?
That's a huge thing right now. People talking about how carnivore and keto are restrictive diets, and they're going to end up making things worse. And
sustainable, because I feel satisfied. I'm not like jonesing for a fix of anything, because I feel satiated because I'm eating nutrient dense foods.
Yeah. Yeah, my brain is getting enough fat and it feels safe. That's a big thing, is that your brain, the reason why you're binging and it feels restrictive is because you're not giving yourself the proper nutrients. You're not getting enough fat. You're not getting enough protein. So for me, carnivore is a great solution. It may not be the solution for everyone. I'm open to saying that. I don't know what's going to work best for somebody else, but I just know from my experience, it is the least restrictive diet I've ever been on. And I've been on so many. I don't walk around feeling hungry all the time and obsessing about food. And for me, that's my definition of not feeling restricted all the time, because I'm not losing my mind thinking about food all the time. It's like, oh, I get to go have a big ribeye, and great, I'll feel good after that. I'm not going to feel like crap and be craving dessert,
Right. I think it's important to say, like, it is very satisfying. And, like I was saying in the beginning of our conversation, like, a lot of people like have that honeymoon period. And for me, like, just changing the food in and of itself, it was not enough. It definitely helped. Being keto, being carnivore, it paves the way for me to get my mind right. Because you can't, when you're still, neck deep in the addiction and you're still eating grains and sugar, you're never going to get clarity of mind when you are eating those things and you're stuck in the addiction. If you're eating a way that physically satisfies you and gives you mental clarity, then you have the wherewithal to tackle the emotional side. Because, like I said, like, I could overeat anything. Right. It doesn't need to be grains and sugar or something sweet, So, but it definitely, removes the triggers and gives us that mental clarity that allows us to be able to tackle the hard mental issues and looking at the reasons why we use food for stuff other than hunger.
Yeah. And I think that leads me to kind of the work that you're doing now. I think that, Yeah, it's really hard. You're really kind of like fighting the odds to try to tackle this stuff on your own, to do the way of eating on your own. Talk a little bit about your coaching, your Instagram, all the stuff that you're kind of doing now to help people who are in that, cycle and really wanting to get out, have that desire to change and get better.
Yeah. So, I've been coaching almost years, and the majority of the people that I work with are type 2 diabetics, and people with food addiction. And so Jessica and I a year ago started the food addiction and recovery group because we noticed that with the majority of our clients that was really the issue. It's not, oh, I need, like, there's always information to learn about keto, how to do keto optimally, what to eat and the food list and, the good, better, best, like there's that component, right? And people can go to Google and you can put in keto, you can put in carnivore, and you can find information. For a lot of people, that's very overwhelming. They don't want to navigate that sea of information on their own. So that's why they look to someone, look to a coach to help them, because they don't want to like go through all of the stuff that they Googled. But Jessica and I found that it really, it was we were working with people just a little bit on the food and the macros, that really wasn't the issue. People know what's keto friendly, what's not. What they don't know is how to go to a family event and Aunt Susie is like, but I made this pie just for you. And then they eat it because they don't want to, because they're worried more about Susie's feelings than their own mental and physical health and their goals. Right. So it was that kind of like, it's like, okay, well, let's put a program together that tackles all these issues. And so we don't talk about, like, we obviously recommend a keto protocol because we think that keto or carnivore is the, eliminating the triggers. That's going to make your recovery easier because you're not bogged down with, bad ingredients and things that make you feel bad. So obviously we did, but we really don't talk about the food. There is no macro discussion. There's no food list. There's no nothing. It's all about how to find your disordered eating patterns, because we all have them. Finding your disordered eating patterns, finding your danger zones. Like, what are the situations that you're in that, like every time you go off a diet or you cheat, you decide to have a cheat meal. What is the situation that you're in that always, precedes that behavior? And then once you identify your danger zones, so what is the lie that voice of sabotage is telling you? Because in that situation, there's always the voice saying something that we're then either rejecting, which, that's what we're learning how to do, is how to reject the voice, how to shut it down. But most of the time, we're agreeing with the voice. We're like, yeah, you're right. It is my birthday. Not having kids on my birthday. That's no way to live. And we agree with the voice, and then we do the behavior, and it all spirals out of control, and we stay, in the vicious cycle. So we learn to identify the danger zones. We identify the lies, and then once we identify the danger zones and the lies, then we can come up with the way to combat it, which is with the truth. What is the actual truth? And then you go back at the lie with the truth. And like, those are the steps to sobriety. And you have to just, do them over and over. And then we also talk about, like, the other things that affects our eating is, our relationships with people, and how when we change the way we eat, how it can affect our relationships. My husband, he is a moderator, never had a weight problem, can eat whatever he wants, can leave food on a plate, not an issue for him. But one of the ways that he showed me love was he would buy me Hershey bars and ice cream. Like, he bought me food.
Yep.
And so, when we change the way we're doing something, it affects our relationships. So then, you got to. We see this all the time. My husband, but he buys me this and he wants to eat this, and so we address that, and we address the holidays and dealing with the food pushers at holiday events. And We talk about self-worth and our deserve level, because all of those things are tied into why we're using food improperly. So we cover all of that. That's really more what coaching is about. It's not, oh, here's this food list and here's your macros. Like, we can do that.
Yeah.
But that's
child's play.
Yeah, that's like, that's the easy part. The food, I always say, like, the food part is the easy part, like knowing like what to eat and figuring out the macros and all that. The hard part is all the emotional stuff.
Yeah. And almost kind of creating like a new tribe, being around. I love that you guys do it in a group, because I think having other people that you're around that are doing the same thing. I mean, that's why I started following you on Instagram, and the people that I follow on Instagram, the people I watch on YouTube, those are all people that are living the way I want to live, doing the things I want to do. I've kind of created my own virtual tribe, of people that I look up to, and I watch what they're doing, because that one part of the brain that's always working is a mirror neurons. That is working no matter what, and it's a survival part of our brain. So if you're around family and you're around friends that are constantly eating crap and normalizing it, making it okay, and saying this won't hurt you, then you've got to have tribe. You've got to have, like what you and Jessica are doing with your group. Like, I think that's so important for people, to help them not to fail, or to feel like they're constantly failing. They've got to have that in place.
Right. I mean, really what we're doing is giving people the tools to deal with those situations that would normally derail them. Like relapse is not inevitable. Like, I think people think like, oh, the holidays, this is like, they're saying, oh, I'm going to, my goal this year is to make it through the holidays. But in the back of their mind, they're like, yeah, it's inevitable. I'm going to get, but it doesn't have to be that way. Relapse isn't inevitable. There are, tools you can use and strategies to get yourself through those situations. And there are things that you can say to loved ones, and ways to approach stuff. Like, I think one of the biggest reasons that people struggle with family at the day that everybody gets together to eat is that a lot of people draw attention to themselves and invite the criticism and the commentary from family members, because we're like, oh, what's in that? Oh, I can't have that. Oh, that's not keto. Like, we say these things but if we just close our mouth, make our plate, chances are nobody's going to pick apart what we're doing. I mean, maybe every family has like that one person that, it makes it their life mission to torture you. But like, for the most part, if you just don't say a word and make your plate, nobody's going to notice what you're doing.
Exactly. Well, how would people find your group and what you do with Coach Jessica, or just find you? Like, tell me how people could get in touch with you.
So there's the website is ketoevangelistcoaching.com. And so we have we offer one-on-one coaching, and we offer the specialty groups. The food addiction group is the group that Jessica and I do, but there's other specialty groups, like for women with lipedema. We do some challenge groups, like there's a fasting challenge, there's a carnivore challenge. So we have those kinds of things to help people to just like get started, trying different things. And then I can be found on Instagram and Facebook at KetoMary71.
Got it. Awesome. Well, thank you. I feel like so much of what you've said is really going to help a lot of people. And I mean, it definitely speaks to my heart. So just thank you so much for continually putting yourself out there and just being a voice that so many people need to hear. Hopefully people will be able to find you, look you up, and definitely get some help. So
thank you. I've enjoyed our conversation. Thanks for having me.
So much fun. Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to do it again.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to